The night my account vanished, I learned how fragile comfort really is. I had always believed money could be rebuilt, but trust, once cracked, never fully returned. I had refused to pay my sister's $15,000 debt with calm honesty, thinking boundaries were a form of love. I believed maturity would be respected. Instead, I woke to vibrating alerts, cold numbers, and a balance that no longer recognized me. I sat on my bed, scrolling slowly, hoping the screen would correct itself. It never did. My chest felt hollow, like something important had quietly stepped outside and locked the door behind it. I remembered every favor I had ever offered, every apology I accepted, every promise that asked me to be patient. Somewhere in those memories, I realized I had never been the son. I had been the solution. Adulthood did not free me from that role. It only gave it better excuses. Generosity became expected. Refusal became betrayal. I replayed recent conversations, hunting for the exact moment I stopped being helpful and started being selfish in their eyes. I could not find it. I wanted to be angry, but disbelief arrived first. I wanted to cry, but confusion was louder. I needed answers, yet I feared what those answers might reveal. Still, I made a promise to myself in that quiet room. I would uncover the truth without losing my kindness. I would face whatever waited ahead without becoming cruel. I did not know then how quickly that promise would be challenged, or how deeply everything was about to change. That night taught me who I truly was. I grew up believing loyalty meant silence. In our house, quiet agreement was called respect, and disagreement was called drama. My mother handled finances with confidence. My sister handled chaos with charm. And I handled consequences with a tired smile. I worked early, saved carefully, and planned years ahead. I avoided conflict the way people avoid debt, because I had seen how interest always multiplied. When my sister borrowed money from friends, I covered the embarrassment. When she maxed credit cards, I offered budgeting advice. When she asked me to clear her latest debt, I finally said no. I expected disappointment. I did not expect hostility. My refusal was gentle, but it landed like a slap. Family dinners turned quieter. Jokes stopped reaching me. Every message felt like a test I was already failing. I began noticing patterns I had ignored. My needs were postponed so her mistakes could feel lighter. My plans were delayed so her emergencies could feel urgent. I opened a notebook and started writing everything down, not to accuse, but to understand. I told myself I wanted peace, not victory. Still, something inside me sensed an approaching storm. I felt it in my mother's shorter replies. I felt it in my sister's forced kindness. I did not know my mother had already chosen a side. I only knew my boundaries were trembling. Something important was slipping away from me, quietly, patiently. That night, I felt completely unprepared for what was about to arrive, and I feared it would arrive very soon. I never imagined that loyalty would become the weapon used against me, or that love would demand such an impossible price from my family again. The request arrived in a soft voice and a heavy number. $15,000, due immediately, because my sister had trusted the wrong promise again. I listened, breathing slowly, trying not to rescue anyone this time. I asked questions instead of offering solutions. I reminded myself that love did not require sacrifice on command. I explained that my savings were for emergencies, not habits. I said it gently, without blame, without lectures. I offered planning, budgeting, and emotional support. I even offered to sit with her while she called the lender. Then I refused the transfer. My sister cried quietly. My mother sighed like disappointment had finally found a place to rest. The call ended early, leaving me alone with a silence that felt heavier than any argument. I stayed seated, hands folded, reminding myself that boundaries were not cruelty. Still, guilt clung to me like smoke in a closed room. I kept my phone close, expecting anger, expecting blame, expecting punishment. Instead, I received politeness. Messages arrived that sounded calm, supportive, and strangely distant. The kindness felt practiced. It felt rehearsed. That scared me more than shouting ever could. I reviewed my bank settings twice. I checked linked accounts, permissions, and alerts. I believed I was being careful. I believed awareness was enough. I went to bed thinking the hardest part was over. I told myself the family would adjust. I told myself respect would follow honesty. I was wrong in ways I could not yet imagine. The quiet was not healing. It was preparing something. Something that would rewrite my understanding of family forever. And I would soon learn the price of that lesson personally. I did not realize how quickly everything I trusted would disappear overnight again. I woke before sunrise and checked my phone without thinking. The screen felt brighter than usual, like it was trying to warn me. My balance showed a number that did not belong to me. I stared, blinked, and stared again. At first, I blamed the app. Then I blamed the signal. Then I blamed my own tired eyes. I refreshed until the truth refused to hide anymore. A transfer had emptied my account during the night. The sender name matched my mother. Heat climbed behind my eyes. Cold settled into my hands. My chest tightened as if the room had quietly lost its air. I called her once, then twice, then stopped myself before the third attempt. I remembered every lecture about trust she had given me. I remembered every time she told me family came first. Those words echoed differently now. My rent was gone. My savings were gone. My sense of safety followed them into silence. I opened my banking history and took screenshots, breathing slowly, forcing my body to stay calm. I refused to panic. I refused to beg. I promised myself I would understand before I reacted. I wrote down times, amounts, and confirmation numbers. I saved alerts and copied emails. I treated the moment like evidence, not emotion. The story had crossed a line I could not ignore anymore. Something inside me cracked softly, like glass under pressure. In that quiet morning light, I felt my childhood illusions finally shatter. And I knew this was only the beginning of a much harder truth waiting for me next. I sat there, breathing, listening to the refrigerator hum, realizing the house felt unfamiliar, as if it had chosen sides while I was still learning how to protect myself from what came next before I finally moved again. My sister texted first, pretending nothing had happened. She asked if I could send the money now, because things were urgent. The casual tone made my stomach drop. I realized she already knew what had been done. My mother followed with a calm message about family responsibility and shared access. She wrote as if we were discussing groceries, not my entire account. I did not answer either of them. Instead, I opened my laptop and began collecting proof. I downloaded bank statements, saved login alerts, and copied every timestamp into a folder. With each click, my breathing slowed and my thoughts sharpened. I remembered setting my mother as a trusted contact years earlier, after my father died. I had wanted safety then, not control. I had never removed that permission. My hands shook as I read the fine print. I felt betrayed, but I also felt ashamed for being careless. I closed the shared access, changed passwords, and locked every door I could find. Then I finally replied with one line, asking why my account was empty. The typing bubbles appeared, disappeared, and returned again. I stared at the screen, realizing this was no longer about money. It was about power, boundaries, and who believed they owned my future. And in that moment, I feared the answer more than the loss itself tonight. Because I understood something inside my family had already shifted, and whatever reply arrived next would decide whether I still belonged there, or whether I would finally have to walk away alone. I held my breath, knowing this silence was not empty anymore, but full of intentions I was not ready to forgive yet at all now. I built my case quietly. I saved emails, statements, and screenshots in 3 different places: cloud, drive, and phone. I did not trust memory anymore. I wrote a timeline in a notebook, marking the moment I refused the debt and the exact minute the transfer happened. Seeing the order on paper made my chest feel tight. I searched local rules about unauthorized access and shared permissions. The language was simple and clear. I did not want revenge. I wanted clarity and control. My sister finally replied with a short apology that blamed stress and pressure. My mother followed with a longer explanation that blamed tradition and family expectations. Neither message mentioned consent. I felt strangely calm, like my emotions had moved behind glass. I could see them, but they could not touch me. I called my bank, explained the situation, and asked to freeze the transaction. The agent listened patiently and opened a formal dispute. Her voice was kind and steady. She confirmed what I already knew. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a choice. I thanked her, ended the call, and stared at the wall in front of me. The paint looked unfamiliar, as if the room belonged to someone else now. In that still moment, I realized my family had forced me to grow up overnight. I understood that survival required honesty with myself first. And somewhere inside that honesty, courage was quietly waiting for me, ready to change everything that came next. I did not know what form that change would take, but I sensed it would ask for strength I had never practiced before, and I feared I might finally have to choose myself over everyone else. The thought both terrified and relieved me, because it meant I was no longer pretending to myself now. Then came the twist I never expected. My aunt called in a whisper, asking if I was alone. She told me my mother had done this before. Years ago, another relative lost savings after refusing to help my sister. The story had been buried under forgiveness, excuses, and pressure. I felt sick, but also strangely validated. I asked for proof. She sent old messages, bank notices, and faded receipts. The pattern was careful and familiar. I realized my situation was not unique. I was simply the next chapter in a story nobody wanted to finish. I thanked her and promised to protect the evidence. I did not confront my mother yet. I wanted her to speak first, without knowing I understood the history. I wanted to hear what version she would choose. I watched my phone and noticed how silence can be louder than noise. Each minute felt heavier than the last. I prepared my words, but I also prepared my exit. Love had taught me loyalty. Truth now demanded boundaries. I felt the ground shifting beneath every memory I once defended. I quietly mourned my innocence, and the version of family I had trusted. That call changed everything. I was no longer confused. I was awake, and I knew the next message would decide who I became. I waited for it, knowing answers would not bring comfort, but they would finally bring direction, and I was ready to walk wherever that truth demanded, even if it meant leaving familiar love behind forever. I feared the pain, yet I trusted the freedom waiting quietly for me at last tonight inside. I decided to leave the family group chat and send one clear message privately. I explained the timeline, the evidence, and the pattern without raising my voice. I stated my boundary carefully, without insults or threats. I asked for my money back and my autonomy respected. Then I muted the conversation. I felt lighter immediately, like I had finally placed a heavy bag on the ground. My shoulders relaxed for the first time in days. I booked a short stay with a friend, just in case emotions exploded at home. I packed only essentials, leaving memories behind for a moment. I reminded myself that distance could be kindness. I reminded myself that safety was not selfish. My phone stayed quiet longer than I expected. The silence felt unfamiliar, but also peaceful. I used that time to plan my finances, my future, and my forgiveness. I was not ready to give it, but I wanted to believe it was possible someday. I organized budgets, changed alerts, and wrote goals I had postponed for years. I did not know who would answer first. I only knew I would not chase them anymore. I was choosing myself without drama, without speeches, without revenge. I was choosing distance as protection, not punishment. That choice scared me, but it also felt honest. And as I closed my bag, I realized I was walking into a version of my life I had never allowed myself to imagine before. It was quiet, uncertain, and fragile, but it finally belonged completely to me alone for the first time. The consequences arrived slowly, like weather changing. My mother returned part of the money with a short note about misunderstanding and stress. My sister sent a longer apology that asked for patience and time. I accepted the transfer but not the excuses. I kept the boundary in place and resisted the urge to explain myself again. Our family gatherings became smaller and quieter. Chairs stayed empty. Conversations ended earlier. I felt grief, but I also felt peace. I noticed how much energy I had spent managing other people's comfort. I noticed how free I felt without that weight on my shoulders. Friends told me I looked different, steadier, less tired. I began sleeping better and planning again. I started saving without fear. I started dreaming without guilt. I learned that karma does not always punish loudly. Sometimes it simply removes access. My mother lost my trust. My sister lost my immediate help. I lost my illusions. We all gained honesty, even if it hurt. I did not celebrate the distance, but I respected it. I understood that love could exist without constant closeness. The space between us taught me lasting strength. It taught me patience, clarity, and restraint. It taught me how to stand alone without bitterness. I still miss them, but I no longer missed the version of myself that kept breaking to keep others comfortable. I carried that lesson quietly, like a scar that no longer bled. And as the days passed, I realized something important had returned to me at last, even though I could not yet name it. It was hope, balanced by caution, waiting for the next honest moment to reveal itself again to me. When I finally confronted my mother, I stayed calm. I took a deep breath and reminded myself that anger would not solve anything. I shared the evidence, the timeline, and the repeated pattern I had uncovered. I explained my boundary clearly. I told her I loved her, but I would not be controlled again. She cried, her words fragmented, apologizing in pieces that never formed a full explanation. I listened without interrupting. I did not try to fix her or her guilt. My sister watched quietly, the weight of the story finally settling on her. I could see the realization in her eyes that things had changed. I did not demand punishment. I demanded respect. We agreed on limited contact and clear financial rules. The conversation felt formal, but it felt safe. I walked away without shouting, without collapsing, without chasing comfort or forgiveness. I felt older, but lighter. The confrontation did not heal everything, but it ended the confusion that had haunted me. For the first time, I trusted myself more than tradition or expectation. I understood that love could exist without obedience. I left their house and sat in my car, breathing slowly. The chapter had finally closed behind me, and I refused to reopen it for anyone again, no matter what. I realized control, respect, and truth were more valuable than any family story that demanded my surrender. And in that silence, I found my strength waiting quietly, ready for the life I would choose from now on. I share this because many of us confuse sacrifice with love. We think endurance proves loyalty. We think silence protects peace. I learned the hard way that boundaries protect futures, even when they feel uncomfortable or lonely. I learned that keeping proof matters when emotions blur, when family expectations cloud judgment, and when history repeats itself quietly. I learned that karma does not always strike loudly. Sometimes it simply teaches through absence, through distance, and through careful observation. My story is not about money anymore. It is about choosing myself without cruelty, about protecting my future without punishing others unnecessarily. If you are standing between guilt and growth, I hope you choose growth. If you are holding evidence, I hope you trust it. If you are afraid of losing family, remember you cannot keep them by losing yourself. I am still healing. I am still forgiving. I am still learning. But I am no longer empty. I am careful with my trust and brave with my truth. Thank you for listening to my experience. Now I want to ask you one simple question. What boundary are you avoiding today, and what might it save you? Think carefully, because your answer could change everything about how you live tomorrow.